And as usual, this is Val Campbell, and this is the Saturday Morning Show. And Brad Krantz. How you doing, Brad?
Good morning. Welcome, everybody. Glad to be here. Joining you here on Saturday, August 8th.
Brad took a couple of weeks off, and we're glad to have him back. And we still hold out hope that one of these days that Jim might pop back in here and say hi, but Jim Dickinson. But we don't know. Sometimes the people got to go do what they got to do, and that's cool. So we're going to have some fun this morning. It is Saturday morning. I'm in the Seattle, Washington area, and Brad is generally basically the same locale. He's south. I'm south. North and east.
Yep.
Yeah, and it is a rainy August day, and I was just thinking, what the heck is this? I bring this woman here from the Philippines, and it's been raining ever since she got here. What is that about?
Welcome to Seattle, man. You got to go somewhere else for the nice weather.
I got a tomato plant sitting out on my deck looking at the rain saying, what is going on? Yeah. But today we want to talk about the next year, because we are in a transition period, a paradigm shift globally. And this is no small thing. And I was sitting looking at some numbers and statistics this week, and I thought, I wonder how many people, Brad, really focus on the fact that this event that we are in the process of right now has an impact on the world that's about, if you just look at the numbers and the metrics, deaths and things like that. And I'm not talking about the virus. I'm talking about the approach to how you manage the virus, right? The actions of governments all over the world, that this event is impacting the world about 2 or more times more than World War II, which was the last decade, was one of these, that was like the most impacting thing in history, right?
Mm-hmm.
This is twice as many people facing starvation and death and economic collapse. And of course, they're not dying from bombs, they're starving to death. So,
Yeah, very real.
It's a horrible situation, incredibly mismanaged for, we'll probably leave most of the postulating on the whys to other people, because there's no end to that. Who knows? Everybody's got theories.
Yep.
But we wanted to talk about 5, megatrends. What things are going to happen in the next year that people can look forward and start planning around, start thinking about how are they going to take advantage of that, because you're either going to be a victim of these situations or you're going to be a successful person because of the way you approach them. Right? I mean, that's...
Yeah, I remember, Val, and I'll throw a comment in here that I remember John Naisbitt's Megatrends, and I think Megatrends 2000, and that was kind of the whole premise, is this guy had looked at data where things are going, and if you got involved in one of these trends or got ahead of it, you're going to do really well. If you didn't, you're going to get left behind. So I guess you have replaced John Naisbitt, and this is Val Campbell's Megatrends 2020. Okay, so here we are.
I'd like to tell you that all of these things, people are going to go, wow, I never thought of that. But most of these things, I think, are relatively obvious. Now, I've got a couple of twists here that I believe in very much, that I think people might look at this and go, oh, gee, I didn't think about that side of it. What a big impact that could be. Because one of the things that impresses me or affects me the most about this situation is when I talk to people and they have no idea what's going on. And that confuses me, because when you've got a global event that's this big, that is going to change lives for decades so much, and you talk to somebody who's these are smart people, but you talk to them, and I had a really good friend of mine say to me about 3-4 days ago, she said, I've been working really hard and I haven't really been paying a lot of attention. What's the deal with this virus? What's really going on with that? And I shared some facts, just some numbers with her, and she goes, wow, you're kidding me. I mean, I thought it was like, the apocalypse. Brad, you got something to say, I could tell.
Well, yeah, I guess that's a strange or even sad paradox that we're in amidst this. But I said, we're going through, and Val, we look at this stuff. I look at this stuff. I know you do. We talk to people around the world on a daily basis. This is an unprecedented change we've never seen, and everybody, I've heard several people say this, we've never seen it in our entire lifetime in the history of the world, basically. So I think still people, you know, if you got your head down, you're going 80 miles an hour, pretending that you know, life is normal, let's just go on doing it. Yeah, you could miss it, but I would be like you and say, how could you possibly miss seeing what's going on? This is unprecedented change that we're facing, and it's going to make an indelible impact on the world. And that's what you're talking about. These megatrends aren't just, well, let's throw some stuff out. I mean, guys, we're in new paradigm is happening, and we're talking about it now. We've been talking about it the last couple of years that we're going to face something, but here we are. And Val, you're talking about somebody that was basically unaware of this.
Well, she was very aware of the virus and all that, but
Yeah.
you know, I mean, she was running around doing things because she was under the impression that this was the apocalypse. And when I shared with her, I said, you know, there's only 1.5% of the population of the United States that's even been infected with this virus. And she was shocked. And I say, you know, we know exactly who the at-risk populations are. And I just shared some of those numbers with her. And she said,
Yeah.
Really? I said, yeah. And even of the people that are infected, 85% of them don't even know that they had it. And, you know, we talk about some of these things. And then, you know, towards the end of this conversation, she says, I don't want to talk about this anymore. It's too depressing. And I said, well, I don't mean to depress you, but, you know, people don't know what the real numbers are. They're being fed information. And I hate to sound like a tinfoil hat conspiracy theory person, but this is pretty weird. All of the numbers and everything, and yet the responses that the state governments and the city governments are having to this are totally disproportionate to the risk. It just doesn't make any sense.
Yeah.
So let's dive in here and let's talk about these 5 big things. And I almost hate to use the term megatrends because megatrends tends to be something that's almost a generational shift, right? And these
paradigm shift, maybe
paradigm shift.
Paradigm
shift. Some of these I think rank in that, but these are more things that I looked at that I said, I wonder if people are really thinking about these aspects and how could they possibly position themselves or take advantage. So the first one I came up with here is the supply chains are breaking. And this was something that was a big shock to people that I talked to when, especially during March and April, when they would go into stores and the shelves would be depleted of different items.
Toilet paper.
Well, yeah, that was a big. I mean, again, first off, I gotta ask you a question. I'm gonna break the continuity here because I had some things I was thinking about this week. All right, Brad, did you ever see the movie The Producers?
I think I missed that one.
Okay, this is Mel Brooks and Gene Wilder, 2 of the funniest characters that ever lived.
Mm-hmm.
Well, the plot of this movie is that these guys came up with a scheme to rip off investors in a Broadway play, and they were going to write the worst musical play in history. It would be so bad that there was no possible way that it could succeed on Broadway. And as a result, they were going to be able to rip off all these investors and you know, walk away with all this money. So they write this abysmally horrible. Is that a word? Abysmally? Yeah, I guess. Horrible play. It was supposed to be a serious musical. Well, it ended up being a big hit, and these guys were screwed because it was so bad. It was hilariously funny. And I almost kind of feel that's how I feel about 2020. It's like if you and I sat down and we said, let's write the most horribly ridiculous, absurd play that we could imagine. And we sat down, we'd say, hey, let's have them do this. And you go, oh, yeah, that's ridiculous. Only a moron would do something like that. And piled all these things on. That's to me, that's kind of what we're looking at here. It's like, yeah, it's outrageous, right? So I was thinking about that this is if you sat down and wrote the most ridiculous scenario you can imagine, and that's what we did.
Well, and it's certainly with being in an election here in the U.S., it's certainly added, I think, fuel to the fire that much of this going on, and this is from many different people I've talked to, agree it's political. There's a lot of political motivation driving our response to a variety of issues here, which is sad, but it's a reality. I'm going to say this is going to go down as one of the weirdest political elections of the century, 20-year-old century. But
yeah, at least that.
True.
At least that. The other thought I had was, where the heck is George Carlin when we need him? Would he not be having a blast with this?
I've been going back and watching some Stephen Wright. Oh man!
And there've been some things that Robin Williams put out politically that have been getting a lot of play right now too. And it's these guys, the great satire comics of the last century, they're dead and gone now, and it's just a crying shame because we don't have anybody like that these days. All the comedians these days are stupid. I mean, they don't even act smart. Where's George Carlin, who was a brilliant guy? Anyway, so let's go back to the supply chains breaking. I just wanted to get that out there. I first started reading about some of these things when I'm reading that the used computer equipment prices are spiking because the supplies of chips and new equipment is slowed because the factories were shut down because of the whole COVID thing. So this is the kind of the theme. And I thought about the food supply chains, especially animal products. Remember where they were dumping milk because the restaurants were all closed and there was no market for milk. Pigs, they were burying 30,000 pigs out in fields because they had no market to sell the pigs to. Well, when these things happen, you get a break in these supply chains and it goes in different directions. They're all interconnected. It affects the feed industry, or it affects the trucking industry because the truckers go broke, and all of these things, get affected, and you can't just flip a switch and turn it back on. No. And I had a friend of mine send me some pictures the other day from a building materials yard locally here. And he asked me, he said, "Are you guys experiencing any building material shortages?" He said, "Because I went into the yard today, the lumber yard I go to normally, and the place is bare." And they said they're having a hard time getting materials because the mills have been all closed or reduced, smaller shifts and things like that because of all this social distancing.
Right.
And he sent me some pictures, and literally this was a huge lumber center. It looked like a Home Depot or something like that. It wasn't Home Depot, but it was a big place like that with all these racks.
Right.
Bare, empty. He said the guys in the stores told him, they said they're just having problems getting materials. And as the economy tries to start back up, you get this limitation that's caused by that. So 53 million jobs lost is the statistic I read this weekend. I was quoting 40-some million, and then it got worse in the last month to 6 weeks. And of course, it's interesting, depending on who you are and what you are. You're quoting different things. I saw this deal come out that said 1.8 million jobs added last month.
Wall Street Journal reported that, and I'm going, wait a minute, guys. It's either this or it's this. But yeah, they keep touting and I always wonder, what are those jobs that are created? Did they just flip a switch or wave a magic wand and voila, there we go?
Well, I'll give you a little bit of insight in that because I was curious about that same thing. And of course, geeky me, I did some research on this.
You're not supposed to do that, Val. You might actually find out something or learn something.
It's, they tell me it's better if you just don't know.
If you just go with that number and say, yep, okay.
Close your eyes and do what you're told.
Yeah.
It seems that as the economy started to pick back up, they hired some people back. Okay. Well, then a lot of these state governments, city governments, they didn't like that because there might be some cases. We got plenty of room in the hospitals. We got plenty of doctors, plenty of PPEs, plenty of stuff but we're focused on cases because it's an inflammatory number. Okay. I'm just putting it out there, folks. You aren't going to like some of the things I say. If you're watching this, there's people out there that are not going to like what I'm saying today, but it's the truth. They started to get things open back up, and then the government slammed them back down.
Yeah.
And just this last week, I posted on my Facebook page that Ems and I were pretty frustrated because we just actually wanted to go out for a walk, go down along the beaches in Kirkland. which we finally did late at night, early evening, dusk, when the mask police were gone and the cities weren't doing, but they had the beaches closed off.
We're not out, huh?
The mask Nazis.
Yeah.
The beaches they literally had them chain link fenced, the docks in Kirkland and things, because heaven forbid the public on a hot day wanted to actually go out and get some vitamin D. We can't have that. So
I have to interject then again, Val. So I flew to Omaha through Dallas, then back through Denver. So why can you get crammed on a metal tube, what we call an airplane, with 200 some people on it sitting right next to each other, and that's acceptable? That's where I see the hypocrisy of this whole thing. I'm just going to call it what it is. You can't be outside on a beach, but you can cram in an American Airlines Airbus and a Boeing 737 in a metal tube and fly from place to place, 3 people abreast, full aircraft.
You know the argument, don't you, Brad? Because I brought that up to somebody this week, and you know what they told me?
What?
It's because they're wearing a mask.
Well, then either social distancing matters or it doesn't. That's the hypocrisy. You can't tell me you need to wear a mask in all these places I've been in this week. Dentist's office, and I was in checkup clinic for my blood test yesterday. You got all these dots on the floor. You got to stand 6 feet apart. But then, so how come you can get in an airplane and sit 3 people abreast, and that's okay? They don't have any social distancing dots on the aircraft there. And
how come the Democrats can get together for a big funeral for one of their folks?
I know.
But you can't go to church. In a church, sitting side by side by side, but you can't. And you know what the answer to that one was?
Don't do as I do as I say.
No, well, that would have been a good one too. But what they said is this was deemed to be an urgent government function.
Baloney. I'm going to call that baloney.
I mean, really, baloney. That's an urgent function of government, but you can't go to church. You see, the thing is, and people probably know because they've heard me ranting about this, the whole mask thing, the whole social distancing thing is just a farce. There is no science behind it. And every time somebody brings up one of these studies, well, here's a study or here's an article or something, and I read it, and it's based on conjecture. And there's actually a really great article out about this today, that all of these studies and articles and things about wearing masks and social distancing for viral events is purely based on conjecture. There is no actual science behind it. And yes, they've had tests, but the tests that they run have absolutely nothing to do with a real life environment. So it just doesn't translate. So anyway, let's move off of this one. The supply chain's breaking. So people need to be looking at commodities. They need to be looking at markets of products, and they should be anticipating. And I hate to suggest that you're going to rush and buy all of the toilet paper, because God forbid you might have to use some paper towels or something, right? But if there are key things, this might not be a bad idea over the next couple of months to kind of stock up on a few things so that you can handle the flexes in the supply chain. And especially if those things are critical to you. If you got a baby, you might want to kind of buy an extra baby wipe here or there. Some, these kind of things, right? Yeah. But we can anticipate that there are going to be shortages, and we can anticipate that is going to extend into some of the food items. The second trend, and this is a big one, urbanization reversed to suburbanization. Over the last number of years, there's been a trend of people moving, especially the young urban tech folks, moving into the urban cities. And I'll use Seattle as an example, but it's the same all over the country. The construction in Seattle of probably 200,000 to 300,000 apartment and condominium units in the last 6-7 years. There were about 50,000 a year being constructed for numbers of years in a row. Everywhere you went in Seattle, right, Brad? There were tower cranes, and they were building these mixed use. Okay, so it's retail space, office space, and living space all in one building.
We had like 50 cranes at one point here a couple of years ago. I heard that's a pretty big number.
Yes. And with the unrest and the economic issues of people working from home now, for instance, in Seattle, Google announced there's 40,000 Google workers in Seattle, and they announced they aren't going to bring them back into an office situation until next July. Now, I want you to imagine that you've been working from home for a year and a half. The company is adjusted to this culture. Do you really think that they're going to pull you back into an office? I think that's extremely unlikely.
Well, they're finding out there's a lot more productivity with people working from home too. So it's been a benefit. I want to say maybe a mixed blessing, a benefit, because guess what? You don't have all the distractions that you used to have, and I can speak to that too. Certainly, having been in an office environment that it was after hours on weekends, I could come in and get my work done without all the interruptions. And
the commuting time. I find that I get up my commuting time. I spend sitting at my desk and things like that, so.
Yeah. I think companies as a whole, Val, are finding out that this whole work from home is actually a boom because their people are able to do it with the technology we have, and their productivity is there, and they don't have all the office overhead expenses right? That now they can reduce some of those. So and I'm seeing that happen in a lot of different industries. I've heard 2 or 3 different people tell me that companies are scaling back their office space because of this.
And this is a big part of this point. We have people literally deciding, and a large part of this has to do with the violence in the inner, the course of the cities.
Not in Seattle, though.
Not in Seattle. Seattle's one of the worst. Portland might be the worst, but just generally speaking,
I know.
There's articles right now. In fact, there was just one came out this last week that was, somebody was walking down through literally downtown Seattle on a weekend, and place was bare. The only people on the streets were the guards that were guarding the buildings, and because there was one other, the street people. The street people and the guards guarding the buildings were the only people on the streets. Now in Seattle, normally the streets are bustling. There's constant activity. Well, everything's boarded up. There's no reason to be there.
Well, I just saw same thing, pictures of San Francisco, which we were just in September. Drove through the Embarcadero, through the financial district. That's almost bare now too. I just saw pictures on that, I think yesterday. And it's like, wow, it's like, they said basically it's like a ghost town.
Well, in response to this, what's happening is that people are moving out of the downtown areas. This trend is reversed. A lot of these people were coming out of college. They were, they're getting high-paid tech jobs. I don't know. There's a couple 100,000 of those tech jobs probably that are in Seattle. Maybe 100,000. I don't know. Most people don't know Seattle, but I think it's somewhat typical. Paul Allen's company Vulcan bought a huge portion of the Seattle area. There's a whole area there just south of what's Lake Union. They bought many, I don't know how many blocks, 30 blocks or something like that over the period of years of this property. And they developed it into a massive urban, high-tech, modern region. And that is where Amazon and Google and all those companies came in there. Well, these companies, being tech companies, their people can work from home. And this is the same thing in the Silicon Valley and San Francisco and Austin, Texas, and all over the country. Their companies are experiencing this. And there is some mixed result that we're getting feedback. But I believe from the people I've talked to, that the mixed results come from the companies learning to adjust. I mean, wasn't just an immediate thing. New platforms had to get developed, and you have new culture that gets created, new ways that you interconnect. So some companies, depending on what they were doing, it was kind of seamless. Bless you.
Excuse me.
Where's your mask?
Okay. I'm good. Does this work, Val? Are we socially distant now? Will this work?
I don't know. I'm only 8 miles from you, or 10 miles. So it is taking some companies, some industries a little more time to adjust. So they're not seeing that productivity jump. Sometimes it's a little bit of a productivity loss. But as they adjust, as they get used to it, you've got a couple of things. First off, people do learn new habits. They learn new ways of working and of being productive, because the productive people want to be productive. So they figure out a way. The next thing is they get used to the different lifestyle of being able to work from home. And most people like it a lot. One of the things that we talked about with the supply chains is that I in my research for that the home exercise equipment is scarce. I mean, it's, the prices have gone up. There was one of the examples of this were kettlebells, these exercise kettlebells.
Oh yeah. Yeah.
The price of kettlebells went through the roof, and they were actually in short supply for a while because everybody was working out from home. Well, myself, I like the ability to work. And when I take a 20-minute break, I go jump on my stationary bike in the living room, and I, kind of spin off for 15 or 20 minutes. And it really, I don't have that in the office. It's not that kind of a convenient.
You don't have your
thing.
exercise bike next to your desk there to jump on.
Well, not that many places have the ability to have a lot of things to do that.
No, I know.
So even if there's a gym in the office, it's not the same thing. You can't just walk over there. And I made the joke that, you've been working at home for a long time when you're putting your pants on, the dog's doing a happy dance because he thinks he's getting to leave the house, right? So there's a lot of us that get used to working in our shorts and then a t-shirt or something like that. So not only the work from home thing, which was actually the third item, but they're moving out of the city, because if you can work from home can be anywhere. So where do you want to live? You don't have to be downtown Seattle in order to avoid the commute, because you don't have a commute. So now in the Seattle area, people are looking at moving more to the east side, and we're seeing cities in other parts of the country coming in and advertising. Savannah, Georgia, Memphis, Tennessee, Missoula, Montana. Some of these cities they're metropolitan areas, but they're not, San Francisco, Seattle, Los Angeles.
Yeah, much smaller densities of people.
Quality of lifestyle is tremendous. The fact that there are businesses, millions of businesses around the United States, mostly in the center city areas, that are not going to come back. We're going to talk about some of this as we go along through the next few minutes, but those businesses are closed. They're not coming back, or they're not going to come back in the same way. So that's really damaging to the tax structures of these cities. There's no parking fees. There's no parking tickets. There's no employee taxes, and B&O taxes are going to be way down because the company's revenues are down. Who's to say if a company's working remotely, why do you have to have your main office in Seattle, and pay the B&O taxes of a big city? Why don't you go to Bend, Oregon, or someplace like that? Because now you don't have to have 40,000 people there. You can have 1,000 people there. We can throw up an office in Bend, Oregon. Or Helena, Montana.
To the municipalities out there, I will just say this: there are consequences to your actions, or rather inactions, and you're going to lose a huge tax base, which you are crying for. And again, it's never a revenue problem; it's always a spending problem. Let's be clear. But yeah, Val, there's going to be a glut, a vacuum of revenue, tax revenue for many of these cities, and ours being one, Seattle. They're going to be seriously hurting, and for a variety of reasons, complete mismanagement, fiscal mismanagement, and et cetera.
So I'm going to give you a little ramification of this, and then we're going to move to the next one because it's related. I'm close to some people that work in the public housing sector, okay? And the public housing sectors are very closely tied to city governments. So we're talking about low-income housing. And there are, I don't even know how many in Seattle, thousands of apartments, thousands upon thousands of apartments in Seattle that are subsidized by the city. And they've been able to do that because of this tax base that got built up because of all the tech workers and the traffic and all of this stuff. Now, these low-income housing associations they're starving to death. And they've laid off all their staff. I literally know one fairly close to them. They've laid off all their staff. There's one guy where there used to be 10 doing maintenance work. Now they can't do anything. They've got literally have apartments that they can't renovate to rent out because there's no money. So as this increases, as this grows, where are these people going to move to? These are already low income, on the fringe people. Now they're going to be homeless. I mean, this whole thing ripples. So this
economics 101.
The movement of the urbanization movement back out to the suburbanization or even moving to other cities is going to have a devastating effect on these locations. Yeah. Now the next one is work from home, learn from home. Big trend. And I'm seeing on social media, initially there was this thing of, oh my gosh, how are my kids going to get educated? Right? Now I'm seeing more and more posts about, gee, my 5-year-old yesterday was watching a lecture, a documentary on space travel and given by one of the astronauts. I don't think my child ever would have been able to see that in school. So people are starting to discover other types of education. Now, I'm not saying that schooling is going to go away.
Right. No.
But I think that if people are working from home, they're going to become more adaptive on ways that they can educate their children part and part. And that's going to impact the education system, because I believe that you're going to see the growth of tutoring organizations or tutors. And I'm going to get to another piece of this in just a minute here. I think that you've got this massive number of people who are not going to be getting their jobs back. I think they're going to be out using tools like jewelbook.com, which we talked about last week, which takes people with skills and matches them up with people who have needs. And I think you're going to have people saying, I'm really good at math. I think I'm going to be a math tutor. I think I'm going to be a geography tutor. I think I'm going to be a political sciences tutor, whatever. And they're going to start, online, work from home. And little Johnny, little Susie are going to be supplementing their education like this. And then there's probably going to be, just like with homeschoolers, there's going to be some kind of standardized tests as they go along. I see this being a much, much bigger move. And it's not going to be just mom having to sit there hours a day, every day in school. We already know that homeschoolers, you can homeschool a kid on 2 or 3 hours a day. Right? Have you ever homeschooled? Were you a part of that?
Our girls were homeschooled. Yes. So
the curriculums are so good. They're so complete and so fast, and they avoid the loss of all the, peripheral time in classrooms.
When you get into the government, how much time and energy is wasted on doing absolutely nothing productive.
Yeah. So a kid that's homeschooled can do the same thing in 2 or 3 hours that they do in 5 hours or 6 hours at school.
Yeah.
So I see this being, on the education side, there's going to be a lot more advancement of this. There's already been, it's only been 6 months, and there's already new platforms, new ways of going about these things. But the other side is that this 50 million jobs lost, a lot of those jobs aren't coming back. The businesses are gone. Yeah. And if you're 50 years old and there's a diminished number of jobs in the marketplace, as you come in and you are applying of 50, 55, 60 years old to get back into the marketplace, how are you going to compete with somebody who's 25 years old that's competing for the same job? What's an employer going to look at this, and what are they going to do? You're 25, 30 years old, 55, 60 years old. So you're going to have this massive increase in the numbers of the chronically unemployed people. Working from home isn't going to be just a nice option for them, just a little side money. for millions of people in the United States, Canada, Europe, working from home is going to be required because there is no other work than work from home. And you're going to probably end up having 2 or 3 or 4 different, side gigs, side hustles, as they call them,
Mm-hmm.
in order to help supplement. And you've got multiple people in families working together to try and cover the needs, because we are hearing right now, and I absolutely believe this, 40 million homes, rentals or mortgages, on the verge of eviction in the United States because the income streams have been interrupted for 6 months. Families can't handle that. And the jobs aren't going to come back fast enough to keep these people from getting eviction notices. So
Yeah.
I don't know how the government's going to deal with this, because you can't just tell landlords forever, hey, you can't evict people and you're not going to get paid. Again, folks, it ripples. If you give the renters abeyance, then you've got to give the landlords, abeyance from foreclosure on their properties. Now the banks are impacted. Now what are they going to do? It ripples, and so it's a huge issue. But this work from home is going to be a monster. And my suggestion there is that people sit down and make a list of their skills, and they need to figure out what can they market in the new economy. You think the gig economy was big 2 years ago? It's going to take over major sectors of the economy.
Yeah.
In the next year, you're going to see that shift. So make a list of your skills and develop new ones. This is the time to get ahead of that curve. Comments, Brad?
Well, yeah, we've kind of been talking about this, that people need to understand that there's some significant fundamental changes happening. It's a major, I'm just going to call them paradigm shifts that we're talking about here. And you're either going to be following that trend, or you're going to be I'll just say lost and left behind, wondering what's happened. And that's what frustrates me so much, Val, on social media. I swear a good portion of American people have their heads buried in the sand about what's really going on. And I'm just going, guys, the day is coming. You can't just pretend life is normal. Well, we'll get on as normal. If you're not changing and adapting to these trends, these paradigm shifts, you're going to be left basically holding the bag, wondering what happened. Where did things go?
Brad, I kind of hate to sound like a jerk. I know I do most of the time probably, but Brad and I have been talking about this for more than a year. We've been talking about this more than a year on the Saturday morning show. We've been talking about this for years, outside of this media, that these things are happening, that this is real. Mm-hmm. And now we have an event that, brings it home hard.
Yep.
And we feel like saying, folks, you had 2 years to prepare for this. We told you something we didn't know what it was going to be, but we knew something was going to happen because it's happened every decade for the last 120 years.
Yeah, it reminds me of that book, and I can't exactly remember the premise. This was 20 years ago. Who Moved My Cheese? Guys, your cheese has been moved. It's not here. It's over here. And I think that's a fitting analogy. The title of the book, Who Moved My Cheese, is your cheese has been moved. You better find where it's been moved to. And it's not where you were. It's somewhere else.
So the next one is going to get into some emotionally charged territory. Probably not for you or me. Not for you or me so much, maybe, but there's a lot of people that are going to be really, really unhappy that I would even voice this, and more unhappy that it possibly is going to happen. And that is that I'm going to predict that Donald Trump wins this election.
Okay.
And I'm going to base that prediction on a couple of things. First off, evidence is mounting that Joe Biden has some kind of neurological dysfunction. I'm not a doctor. I'm not going to try and analyze the guy or say what or wherefore. I'm just saying it's obvious that there is a major issue here.
Yes.
And it is growing increasingly obvious that they are hiding him.
Yeah, and I've watched some of the stuff, and I usually don't, Val. I'm gonna back up where I'm coming from. I didn't vote for Trump last time. I voted third party. I didn't vote for Hillary. I didn't vote for Trump. I'm not sure who I'm going to vote for now, but I'm going to probably say with about 99% certainty it's not going to be Biden, because he does. I would say he's got Alzheimer's, dementia. Something's going on from clips I've seen, and these aren't doctored clips. These are just snippets of his public interaction, and the guy he's just not there. And I'm not a big political guy. I don't follow Fox News. I don't follow all the other pundits, but just stuff I've been watching recently would lead me to believe that if that's your candidate, you're hurting. I mean, the guy's not all there.
And there are some people that would vote for anybody. Doesn't make any difference who it is. You could run the family pooch out there and they'd vote for the pooch instead of Mr. Trump.
Somebody said they like him because of his smile, Joe, and he's making no sense in a lot of his stuff he says. But I heard somebody say, yeah, they're going to vote for him because they like his smile. And it's like, are we at that level where we have no ability?
Yes, we are. Yes, that is the kind of mentality that we have involved in the selection process to sit in arguably the most powerful chair in the world.
Yeah.
So a lot of this comes down to who's going to be his running mate. Now, currently right now, the front runners seem to be Susan Rice and Kamala Harris. And the pundits that I listen to say, why would he pick Kamala Harris? Because California is already going to vote Democrat. And Susan Rice has so much baggage from Benghazi and some of the other things that, see, part of the issue with these people, when you pick a vice president, you want somebody that's not going to hurt you, right? That's part. I mean, this is one of the reasons why Trump chose Pence. The guy's got nothing in his background that, other than the fact that he's a Christian. That's pretty hard to get too upset about for too many people. But he's just not the guy that's done anything controversial, particularly in his whole life.
He hasn't really said or done anything stupid. So
no, and he's squeaky clean. He won't even have lunch or meet with a woman unless his wife is there. Yeah, so this guy is really clean, and he wouldn't hurt Trump. So now, but since Biden backed himself into a corner and limited himself tremendously by who he said he would pick, now you get to the point, well, who can this be? And Kamala Harris has tremendous baggage. She's known about some of the affairs and the things that she did. This is like public record. This is not even close. And it's why she did not do particularly well in the primaries. And Susan Rice has incredible baggage. We're talking about video footage that can be brought out and used during an election.
Yeah.
So then the thing turns to maybe Michelle Obama. Well, she doesn't really have any experience whatsoever. But again, in this climate, that doesn't make any difference. I'm telling you, you could run the pooch out there and it would get a vote. And there is a certain amount of the population that would have that emotional appeal. But still, you've got to deal with the fact that Joe Biden has to either resign or die in order for that person to take over. And that's never happened. Has that happened ever in human history? Roosevelt, maybe.
Well, no, I forget, in the 19th century, there's a president, I want to say it was Harrison, that only lasted in office a month. But I mean, you didn't have the social media and constant press you did then that people were aware. Maybe I think that was a sudden death. It wasn't a mental deterioration at all. But with the media scrutiny we have today, you can't hide. And I just started watching some of this stuff on Biden, and I'm not a guy who invests a lot of his life in it. But I'm going, there's some things clearly out of place there that would.
And there are a couple of other things. So there's the whole vice presidential issue. Then the next thing is he has made two tremendous blunders with statements he's made, at least two, that tend to disassociate the African American community. And that is a community that is really up in arms and aware right now. Very, very aware.
Yes.
And you also have, for the first time in history, you have some very, very loud African American voices on the conservative side that are getting a lot of play in public media. So I think that that this is a very, very weak candidate.
Yeah.
Admittedly, against a president that has a lot of not just dislike but hatred amongst a large group of people. And I think part of the discussion on that I'm bringing forth is why is there so much hatred and resistance on the part of what we call the dark state, the James Comeys and the Clappers and the Brennans, these people in the FBI and the CIA that have been actively plotting to overthrow the government? And the evidence is clear. There's not even any debate about this anymore. And Attorney General Barr is bringing out a lot of this prosecution. Yet the way they went after Flynn and some of these things, it's so obvious, and yet they are being insulated by the political structure, the bureaucracy, what we call the deep state. And as more and more of this comes out, I'm predicting that you're going to find that this whole Epstein, Ghislaine Maxwell pedophilia thing tied in with some of the Hollywood elites and the Washington D.C. elites and some of these people in the dark state, the deep state, are going to come out more and more. And I think you're going to see that the issue is that Trump represents an existential threat to these people. This isn't just we dislike his politics. There is that. He's the only person in history that's been able to stand up to these people and start exposing some of this underworld characteristic that's become so obvious now. This isn't, there was a time when these were tinfoil hat, rabbit ear, antenna kind of conspiracy theory things. I think we're way beyond that now. I think we're to the point where, with the exposure of Bill Cosby and Weinstein and Kevin Spacey, and now, and you remember Kevin Spacey, I mean, they flayed him, but he was really, really closely aligned with the Clintons and Ghislaine Maxwell and Epstein and all those characters. And so this goes deep and far. And there was a statement that Hillary Clinton made in the election, and she was outraged and very profane. You remember she said, if this guy gets elected, we're all going to hang, or we're all going to jail, or something like that.
Yeah, I didn't follow that, but there was
you can look it up.
People on the left were like up in arms about this.
She was even more. She was saying, if this guy gets elected, we're going to jail. So you better get this stuff fixed up. So there obviously there's a lot of criminal stuff there. There's a lot of really ugly stuff going on there, and so I am going to step out with this prediction that Trump gets reelected.
I'm gonna make a comment here. I had coffee with a good friend of mine. And I'm not gonna mention him. He was a staffer for one of our Republican congressmen for a number of years. He didn't vote for Trump last time, but in talking last year, was about a year ago, he said he thinks Trump's going to win. And this guy has been in the political arena. But I want to make this plea to anybody watching this. Don't get all bent out, pull your hair out because Val's saying, and I'm leaning toward, I really think Trump's going to win. But I just want to say, turn off Fox, turn off CNN, turn off MSNBC and all this other stuff, and start thinking about what people are saying. Use your brain. And if you want to criticize me for that, fine. I'm asking you to please start thinking about this and using your cognitive skills, using your ability to critically think. If you have that to whatever capacity, and divorce yourself from all the rhetoric, because we're getting bombarded by so much rhetoric on this. It's unreal. But put your thinking caps on about who do you think can run this country? Where do you want it to go? And I'm going to leave it at that. That's my 2 cents.
Well, I appreciate that, Brad. And I do understand that a lot of the things we're talking about here are going to inflame people. There's nothing I can do about that. The goal and the intent here are 2 parts: to get people to start thinking about these things with the idea of, divorcing themselves emotionally from this and start thinking about, how am I going to position my family and my
Right.
business things and
Right.
my careers so that they're able
Right.
to succeed and actually perhaps still exist. How am I going to keep
Yeah.
my home 2 years from now?
And that's important. That's important, Val. This whole thing, we could get into this on business, but business people, you have to divorce yourself from the emotions of something like, it's my baby, it's my business, and especially in politics. So this is my candidate, it's my party. I've always voted Democrat or Republican. Divorce yourself from the emotions. And what Val is saying, you got to start paying attention. What are the consequences of this and how are they going to impact you? The emotions are going to mess you up. If you follow your emotions, you're going to probably end up, I'll just say, in the tank or in the ditch. So listen to what he's saying here, guys.
And on the other side, people that are all excited because maybe they think that the Trump is going to win. You need to start preparing yourself for if Biden wins. You need to really start thinking about what is that going to mean to your family? Project ahead 2 or 3 years. How am I going to, what are the ripple effects here?
Yeah.
Okay. And I mean, it's not my prediction for the reasons I've said here. But I'm going to tell you that there is a part of me that looks at the way major portions of this company pick presidents in election. It has nothing to do with ability. It has to do with imagery. And they'll vote for somebody because of what that person represents.
Yeah.
That had nothing to do with their ability to perform or do anything. Okay. And you can say this about Trump. You can say it about Obama. You can say it about Biden. You can say it about, anybody. There is a big chunk of the voter block that votes for somebody based on just their image.
Correct.
Correct. What they think they represent, not as a performance. And just so everybody knows, my pick for the last election would have been Carly Fiorina. She's awesome. She's got global experience. She had the whole package as far as I was concerned. This is probably one of the most competent, capable people that I've seen run for public office in decades. And yet she got nowhere in the primaries. So the competent and best people, in my personal opinion, don't make it to the front of the stage. That's just the way our system works. So let's go into the next one, because we're closing up on the hour here. And this is a hard one. This is a hard one for me because of what's going on nationally right now and the radical terrorist organizations that we're seeing affecting our country. And yes, they are radical terrorist Marxist organizations that are being promoted in this country. They've been planning this group of events for decades. Brad and I grew up in the 60s. Brad remembers the SDS. Brad and I remember the Black Panthers.
Black Panthers, yeah.
I remember the Pink Panther Party too. That was funny, but the Black Panther Party. Yeah. We remember those radical Marxist organizations that morphed themselves and realized that they could not be successful by calling themselves what they were. They had to put forth an image and names like the bunch of people that love puppies when they're actually behind the scenes doing something exactly the opposite.
Right.
And so we understand how the Marxist organizations develop themselves because we've lived through this.
Well, and we've studied and read it too. And if you're hearing a lot about critical theory, guys, that is rooted in Marxism. Okay, that's where that comes from. Karl Marx. I've read enough of him. I've got another book on order to brush up on him. But this is a atheistic-based system that all our problems are due to our social circumstances and that too. There's no allowance for God. There's no allowance for the normal economic factors. And if you take that forward to what Lenin implemented, I've read is What Is to Be Done. He was a political terrorist, though he was never called that. But that fact was Lenin is. So all this stuff is rooted in Marxism, which is antithetical to capitalism and God at its core. That's what it's about.
And that's a fact. There's no, you can't debate that. But what people don't understand, because they don't really read behind the sign.
No, they don't know any of the history.
They see the sign and they go, oh, Antifa, anti-fascist. They see a BLM sign, they go, oh, Black Lives Matter. I'm for that. I'm for Black Lives Mattering, right? Who's not for Black Lives Mattering? Who's not for loving puppy dogs? Well, we love puppy dogs. Who hates puppy dogs? Nobody wants to see puppy dogs get hurt. But behind that are radical trained Marxists who are creating a facade that they operate within. And when you, and I don't want to get too deep into BLM or some of those, read their website, go to their about section and go down to the bottom. You know where you get to the bottom line is down at the bottom line. Go down there to the bottom couple of paragraphs and read what they're really about. And then that opens your eyes a little bit. Now, if you agree with those philosophies, you feel good about that. My point is that most people don't. And if they put that in their name, they wouldn't have gotten anywhere. They would have no notoriety. They wouldn't be on baseball fields and have painted in the streets.
And you know what Lenin called them? You know what Lenin called them? Useful idiots. And that's people that are just following. And that's what they're trying to do. They are creating useful idiots, people that know nothing about the ideology or the basis of it or what it really stands for. And they're fooling a lot of people. And again, Lenin used the term useful idiots. Guys, go read Lenin. Go do your history homework so you understand where we're coming from. And you're not going to find it on TV, guys. You're not going to find it on the networks. Those guys are also very useful idiots about informing you, but not educating you about what's going on. Okay, that's my 2 cents.
So my fifth and final point is just this. Social unrest is going to get worse.
Yeah.
It's not going to get better. It's going to get worse. These people are paid and supported by foreign governments and domestic people and organizations that are very well funded. There's millions and millions and millions of dollars pouring in to these organizations. They are intended to disrupt society. Their purpose is to destroy the nuclear family and to destroy capitalism, because they want to create a one world socialist government. And that is what is at play here. And
theory.
One of the things that's going to kick off the next wave of all of this violence is the fact that I am here predicting that the police officers involved in the death of George Floyd will get acquitted. Not maybe all of them, not on all charges, but it's going to be enough to trigger cities burning, because they're going to promote it. And I never could understand the decision, other than just political pressure, to advance the criminal charges on those officers up to second-degree murder. That is a much, much higher proof of burden in these kinds of situations than manslaughter.
Political pressure.
But now they've got the body cams hitting the social media. And if you've noticed, the body cams clearly show that George Floyd was resisting arrest. He was not cooperating. He was wrestling with the police. He was, causing all these issues. I'm not excusing the way that the police officers handle this. I think they're very, very badly trained. We've known this for decades, that these police officers are not trained to deal with these things properly, and they don't even screen for what I believe are the correct personalities for that kind of a job. But this is the culture, and the culture and the people that they hire are that when you've got somebody that's resisting, you put them down. You put them on the ground, you submit them. This is mixed martial arts, guys. You don't stop until the bell rings. And this is the nature of what happened. And I'm not going to go too far into that, because it's pretty obvious. If you watch those body cam videos, that there were 10 minutes or 8 or 10 minutes of this guy resisting and struggling with the police before they ever got him on the ground. He was not cooperating. He was obviously on something. Even his 2 associates, his friends or whatever that were there, the police were asking them, what's going on with this guy? And the woman said, I don't know, he's got something going on. In other words, the woman is saying, yeah, this guy's kind of nuts. And he's obviously they subsequently found out that he was on 3 or 4 different drugs. And so there's mitigating circumstances here that are going to make it very, very difficult for a prosecution to get a murder 2 charge against these guys. So they can't plea bargain it, because that's going to burn the city down. They're going to have to go through the process. And if they don't get full convictions on everybody, and I don't see how they can do that with that level of burden. And that's just my opinion. But, you can imagine what happens with these organizations poised and waiting. They're going to have the bricks in the wheelbarrow. They're going to have the gas mask distributed. They're going to have everything lined up.
The stage has been set, Val, that if they do get that unfortunate verdict, and again, I saw the video of the police officer. It was really hard to watch. But again, there's always the backstory, the part that we didn't see, and the media is always going to play it their favor. But the stage has been set for even more. They're just waiting for that one more incident that'll give them the right to just, again, go to town on.
None of this is accidental, folks. Why do you think there's this big fund or this big push to defund the police departments?
Yeah, that makes no common law sense. I mean, no sense.
All this pressure, whatever. It's because they're already planning for the next group of events. And now you've got a demobilized police department, demoralized. They're underfunded. They are less in numbers. And they are setting the stage for a much more aggressive push. Yeah. And it's, part of me thinks people are going to look at this and go, oh my gosh, the world's coming to an end. No, I'm not saying that. I'm saying we're going through a crucial time in history. We're going through a paradigm shift. So we have the opportunity. Now we have foreknowledge. We know what's going to come up in the next year. 100% proof? No. But the things I'm talking about here, 99% of this stuff is going to be true.
Yep.
And it doesn't make any difference. Some of this stuff is not going to make any difference who gets elected to the presidential office.
No,
and they have other agendas. That's just one more step that maybe they can weaken one more position.
Yeah, and Val, I want to just say, and I didn't pull the quote up, but the quote is from GE Jack Welch. Basically, reality is not what you want it to be or wish it to be. It is what it is, and that's kind of what we're saying here. We don't hope this is going to be true. We're not wishing for. I'm not excited about it. I live in Seattle. Val lives in Seattle too, but you have to face reality as it is, not as you wish it was or you hope it would be. And that's kind of I think our message today, right, Val? These are the realities that are taking place. You can choose to get in front of that or position yourself to take advantage of that as much as you can, or I guess bury your head in the sand and say, well, that's not what I want, so I'm just going to pretend like it's not happening. It's going to happen anyway. So we're just saying, we're heads up, I guess. We'll use that term. We're giving you heads up on what's happening.
And we are making the choice daily to be a victor or a victim.
Yep.
It's a choice. If you don't choose to be a victor, you are by default choosing to be a victim.
Yep.
And so this is a start of conversations. And, as we have been for the last year, we're going to continue talking about these things because people need to know the truth. They need to know what's coming up as much as we can predict. That's the business we're in, right? Yep. We're in the business of predicting trends and taking advantage of those trends. That's what we do. Nothing else from me today. Next weekend, though, we have Paul Carpenter joining us, a friend of mine, an attorney who is a brilliant guy. I love following him on Facebook, and the discussions and conversations that he puts out there are always very stimulating. Very, Paul's not an edgy guy, but he just is really well rooted in the truth. And so he tends to come up with some stuff that gets some conversations going. So that's next Saturday's show.
Fantastic. Looking forward to it.
All right. And for me, I'm signing off on Saturday, the 8th of August, 2020, and a wild year it's been so far.
Yeah, guys, take action on what we're saying, man. Reach out to us if you got questions, but just take action. Don't sit there. Don't be a spectator. Get involved. Take action. It's your life. It's your future that's at stake.
Absolutely.